Sid, thank you so much for taking the time to chat here on the show. I really appreciate it. And also your patience. I know in the back room here, I was running around dealing with some family stuff. And I just actually got married a couple weeks ago. And so, we still got a full house of in-laws and family. And that's always a fun ride. So thanks so much for that. But real quick, why don't you just tell folks a little bit about your career background and like, how did you get into product marketing?
Absolutely. And first off, congrats. I did not know that. That's super exciting. I'm also due for a July wedding, so only can understand where you're at right now. Uh, but yeah, I'll jump into it. So I'm Sid Khaitan. Right now, I'm working as a senior product marketing manager at a Swiss-based startup called Beekeeper. Where I cut my teeth with product marketing, it actually all started with market research. So I was in the clinical trial space and was doing market research, surveys, IDIs, in-depth interviews, a lot of that type of research that really made me realize how much I love this stuff, understanding customers, all of that. However, of course, in that space, in that role, it was a little slower than I wanted. So from there, I went to a content strategy role, same thing in like the pharmaceutical area, business development types of functions for health tech startups. And once I put all those pieces together, a friend of mine was like, "Hey, you should apply here. There's a product marketing role at this startup." With, and I looked at the job description and I'm like, "Wait, this is everything I've done in the last 5, 6 years." So that kicked off my journey into product marketing and haven't found any reason to leave since.
Awesome. Well, real quick, just because product marketing seems to vary based on the organization, right? When you saw those tasks or jobs that needed to be done, what were some of the ones that just stood out and said, okay, this is specifically pulling from the things that you had done in the past that were very unique and maybe that were functions or tasks that you had in other roles that were now part of the product marketing requirements?
Yeah, great question. So the one I forgot to mention that I think is actually the most important was some level of account management experience, being able to enable sellers and help really the buyers understand why they need your product. I did a lot of that when I was in this business development type of role. And it was this really odd feeling that I got, which was I've done all of this work that's really about business development, talking to the clients, actually selling them. And then all of a sudden, I'm being asked to enable sellers to talk to the buyers. So in my mind, I just saw a very clear connection. Aside from that, the market research part, of course, doing those surveys, asking those questions definitely played into this. And for me, in those early years, I really got into social listening. And at that point, it was just taking off this idea that you can use social listening to understand what patients are thinking, have that inform your strategy, have that inform your messaging, your content. So I would say when you combine those 2 or 3 areas, market research, content strategy, business development, I really realized, wow, this is all a culmination of my
Mhm.
experience, and product marketing is the perfect container for all of that knowledge and experience.
I have been studying the product marketing function for the last couple years, and my co-founder Justin is a former salesperson turned product marketer, and I think that's one of the attributes that I think make him really, really good. There's something about not just product marketing, but I think specifically product marketing, about former salespeople like going into marketing functions and doing really well, right? And like understanding it in a unique way, because I don't know that it works as effective the other way around. So what I mean is like a marketer going into, let's say a digital marketer going into sales. I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting thing to debate, right? Like, what's your opinion? Do you think that it's as effective that way versus a salesperson going into marketing? Because I would advocate that it seems to me a little more effective, right, and gives you a more holistic understanding of what needs to happen. And I think the last point I'll make there, I'd love to get your thoughts on this, is like the understanding around alignment and collaboration needing to really be at the forefront for this relationship to work and for the really the best interest of the organization, I think is like super key. And I think like salespeople really get that for some reason.
Yeah. So I'll start with, do I think product marketers that have sales experience make for great product marketers? And I think Chris Orlob said this best, which is if you learn how to sell one to one, selling one to many is going to be less of a problem. Whereas if you start selling one to many and then trying to sell one to one, you don't know some of those challenges that you face when you're dealing with one to one sales. So I definitely think it gives me a leg up. And as I've started to think about it, I specifically was born in an account management role. I've had sales experiences as well. But the account manager role, especially, you start to gain some serious empathy for the buyer because not only are you trying to sell them today, you're trying to help them grow with your product and also just in general as the buyer. So, in terms of having that experience under your belt and really having that empathy for the buyer, understanding their world, I think is a huge kind of advantage over other product marketers who might not be thinking of it that way. Now, I don't think you need to have seller experience to be a great product marketer. I've met folks that are really incredible, but it sure does help. Similarly, to your point of can product marketers make the change to sales and can they flip the switch? We don't see that often. At
Yeah.
least when I look around, I don't see it often. The most clear path to that for me is you basically are a founder. You go from product marketing to selling because now you've founded your own company and now you have to sell all the time. So I think product marketing to, and you know this, I'm sure more than most, um, product marketing to sales, I think the best transition would actually be the transition I made to product marketing, which is more of a business development role,
Mm.
not to be confused with sales development and becoming an SDR, but more so being able to pitch larger scale businesses and see it from an expansion standpoint. I say that specifically because product marketing looks over that full life cycle, right? From marketing, sales, customer success, and beyond. It's not just the initial demo, it's not just the end of the journey either. So, because they are a little more focused on that end stage as well, I think there's a clearer path and transferable skill in terms of going from expansion and thinking about the full life cycle to doing more of an account management type of function.
Mm.
So that's kind of where my head is at. And
Yeah.
when I think about sellers and how well they are able to work internally with different teams, I think it's more of a best of breed for all functions acts that way. So when I see the best product managers I've worked with, they have their hands into what legal is doing and what RevOps is doing, even if they don't need to day to day. Sellers are really great at this because they have to leverage those resources. They depend on them for their survival, right? They have to go talk to legal, they have to go talk to product marketing, they have to get the best out of everyone in the company so that they can present that to the actual buyer. Product marketing, of course, needs to have that knowledge, but sometimes they're not really on the hook for presenting that knowledge to the buyer themselves. They also have this conduit who's the seller.
Mm.
I think that needs to change. I think product marketers should get closer and closer to the buyers. And at least I've found by sitting on the demos, listening to the calls, having my own conversations with could be prospects, just people in the space that are part of the community, has really enlightened the way I think about the market and can go from theory to practice really quick.
I love that. I mean, I am a huge advocate of getting your hands dirty, right? Getting in there, having the conversations. I know like systems like Chorus and Gong and these recording tools have made it easier, but it's just not the same. It's just not like it's great. It's better than, surveys and, and stuff like that. But it's when you're having that one to one conversation, you're able to hear something and say, hey Sid, can I just ask you on that point, and kind of dig a little deeper? You can't, you really do that in real time for obvious reasons with the call recording stuff. Question, because as a sales organization, salespeople a lot of the time, and I've been one of those, although I wasn't one of those territorial salespeople, right? Like I always have been very collaborative and just enjoy the team sport of go to market, right? Of company building in general. But there is this dynamic that exists, which I think you. I'd love to get your feedback on. I'm curious to see if you've seen this, which is that sometimes sales managers are very territorial around like their sales reps' time, and also sales reps are sort of territorial around the conversations they're having with their customers, right, and their prospects. So they sometimes are like resistant to allowing a product marketer or a marketer um, to hop on those calls, right, or to get involved. A, have you seen that? And B, like, do you have any tips or strategies that you've seen that help kind of like eliminate some of those issues?
Yeah, great question. So, first off, I've definitely seen that. A few of my first roles in product marketing at a sales led organization. Yeah, for good or bad, sometimes that dynamic comes up where reps are kind of protective of having additional conversations. I think the first thing I do to break that ice and make sure it's easy to approach the rep, ask them for these conversations, is to really just show that you have empathy for them and the buyer. So I'm reminded of even for this last job when I showed up to the interview, I said, "Hey, I'm going to show up on day one with research from an actual prospect or someone in this field." So right now we sell to HR buyers primarily. And I said, "I'm going to go find an HR buyer that sits in our ICP that happened to be in my network and someone I can talk to and use most of her knowledge and the things that she actually said to inform my messaging strategy for your case study that will eventually get me the job." Now, when I showed up in day one and started having those one on ones with a few of the reps, I made it very clear that I had this kind of knowledge. So then they're able to have a conversation back with me instead of me saying, let's just talk about how things are at work and hey, can I join a conversation? Instead, you just show up, hey, can you help me understand this prospect? I'm trying to understand better because if you go into their head, what are they thinking about? They're thinking about the buyer and they're thinking about how are they going to ask the right questions to get the discovery they need to provide pain and then eventually show how your product ties to that pain. So when we have that opportunity and we're able to show that, yeah, we kind of understand that path as product marketers and are willing to go out there to the market and have those conversations ourselves, then sellers start to trust you a lot more
Mm,
because I think there's this stigma around marketing that like we kind of just sit behind doors and create ads and don't have those conversations. I think product marketing especially is uniquely positioned to show up as a quasi seller and have those meetings, have those discussions, bring them back to the sellers. I'll give one more example. We had a conference and I got invited to go. And in the past, I've been that product marketer that came to a conference and I was just kind of like walking around the floor, getting competitive intel. Okay, great. That's fine. It's checking a box. This last time, I brought a tripod, my iPhone 13 at the time, and a little mic, one of those tiny mics, and started recording and found just people to talk to, got them on the floor, recorded a quick snippet, brought that back to the sales team. How do you think they reacted? Right? They're like, "Oh wow, this guy gets it. He's going
yeah.
to go do the discovery himself. He's going to go find these people to talk to and gain insights that I can actually use when I'm selling."
Mm.
And funny enough, I kid you not, when I found one of these people to talk to and started telling them a little bit about our business, they just closed one as an opportunity a few weeks ago. So how's that? When you go show your fellow AE, hey, I literally sourced that deal. This is actually marketing sourced. That's how you really show and build trust. And that trust is paramount today.
Oh
Like
yeah.
I've been in the position where I didn't have that trust and it shut me off from so many conversations, so much insight. So then I do become that person in the ivory tower that's just kind of theorizing. But when you're at the ground level with them, showing them that you know how to hold a conversation, get important insights out of someone, and really just show you care, have that same buyer empathy as the seller
Yeah.
does, you build so much trust that you can stretch infinitely and do better at your job.
Sid, you said something that I just think is, I don't know. I've been doing this for 20 something years, and I've never seen the lack of caring that I've been seeing in the workforce the last couple years. I don't know if it's, well, I'm gonna guess that it's some sort of reaction to like all the craziness we've had on planet Earth the last couple years, right? People were, just getting their lives upended in bizarre, like sci-fi movie style kind of ways, right? But like your point of caring is a huge point. Like I think it's one of those things that maybe we don't really talk about as much, but is kind of a bullet point on training and onboarding and stuff. Oh yeah, get them to care, but I think like getting that to be actually done effectively is really really huge. And so to your point, a marketer, so for the marketers out there, when you're able to communicate that you care, and this is beyond just like, oh yeah, rah rah, at happy hour, but doing things that show. We all know when someone cares. Like we know that they care because they don't just say it, but they show up with it in the same way that you proactively went around the floor and did that, right? Because you care about excellence, right? Within your own sort of being, but also for the organization in general. And then so for the leaders out there, I think this is something that we really have to dig into and understand. Like, from day one, are we hiring people that could actually show that they care, right? I'll get off my soapbox there, but when you said that, like that's what really stood out to me pretty deeply. I wanted to ask you a couple things. You mentioned like some ideas around like how to equip champions with the right tools to do that internal selling, because the bottom line too is another big trend over the last couple of years is this idea that folks are working remotely and needing tools and things like that to be able to do that internal selling. How can we do that from a product marketing perspective? How can we further enable that internal multi-threading?
Yeah, great question. So, speaking of getting into someone's shoes, right? So, we just acquired a recent software for product marketers. And when we're buying software, then it becomes very clear some of the challenges that our buyers in general, at large, software buyers have to deal with. Now, I'll just name one that I've been thinking about recently, which is I don't necessarily have buying power. I don't get to sign the checks. I have to go through my manager, who might have to go through her manager and CMO. That's how we get there. But when I see technology and I want to acquire it, then I'm going to try to push for the demo internally. I'm not going to be able to sign the check. I don't have the purse, but I want the tech. So as a buyer, if we flip that around and think of it as a product marketer going to a buyer, you need to enable your champion to make the case internally, right? And understanding that the buyer might be on your side and they can help you, but they need your help as product marketer slash seller to actually navigate their own company because they have insider information on how decisions get made, but they really do need help when it comes to convincing, persuading, and making a case. Because often, even the best of us, we struggle to get that initiative locked in internally, especially today with where we are from an economical standpoint. So there needs to be support there in order to get the buyer to get to that next step, to get to from a demo to an actual kind of group meeting, to go from one use case to multi-threading and having multiple folks involved. So I'm just reflecting back on this purchase we just made, and now we're in implementation. How do you answer the questions and fears that are happening early before the demo and during the demo so that when the implementation happens, some of that's answered. There's going to be a lot more questions that pop up, but there's enough trust built that this buyer's like, okay, I think we'll be able to figure this out. Because to me, it's the there's no knowns, there are unknown unknowns. And when you're buying software, there's a lot of unknown unknowns. You don't know what's going to happen after you purchase it. And basically, someone is telling you that this is going to work. You have some proof, sure. But in order to get to the next step, You really need to empower those buyers, those champions, with the information they need to succeed because ultimately they're taking a huge risk. They're saying that, yeah, I think the software is going to work. I'm going to sign up my company to drop a certain amount of money. And if it doesn't work, who are they going to blame? They're not going to blame the software. Yeah, sure, they will, but they're going to look at the person internally who just, squandered away $25,000. So I think those are some of the questions we need to ask as product marketers and sellers. How do we increase the confidence of their decisions? It's not just the value proposition. It's not just the messaging. It's not just showing how we're better than competitors. It's showing why and how the buyer can go from step one to step three and four.
Are there any particular tools or assets that you recommend product marketers should really double down on? So let's say one pagers or some other sort of assets that you found to be really, really key throughout the buyer's journey.
I mean, we're on the Asset Mule podcast, so no, I think the this category is emerging, this buyer enablement kind of area. There's tons of tools in this space, Align, Doc, for in terms of like a shared sales space. But I think what y'all are doing is also really important because with Asset Mule, you're extending and making sure that what comes from product marketing actually makes it to the buyer versus having the intermediary that's sales. And of course, making the lives of sellers easier because they want to be able to reference the right information and get it in the hands of the buyers faster. But the tension there is that it needs to be personalized enough. That's why there's a joke of, can you find me a manufacturing customer that's in Switzerland and has 500 employees? That's tough to do. But if you can find those common pains and still paint that story for them and make it easy to reference, the whole idea is the buyer needs the information. Yeah, whatever way we deliver that, that's fine. It could be a shared workspace. It can be an asset that's easy to stand up. It can be a web page, whatever. But at the end of the day, the outcome needs to be that that champion, that buyer, feels very comfortable presenting it internally, and then internally, the other people in the room, the economic buyer,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
person the IT person, all of that, they feel confident that this is going to work.
yeah.
So, yeah, I mentioned a few tools, but I think for product marketers, Aligned, Doc, and then what we're actually in the process of implementing is called Dito. It's a new customer advocacy platform that I'm really excited about. So, those are the ones off the top of my head that I just came up with.
Yeah, I've heard of Dito and I've heard some really cool stuff. They do some stuff with AI. That's awesome. Sid, thank you so much for being on the show and sharing your insights. If folks wanted to connect with you on social, maybe follow your content or insights, or maybe get in contact with you directly to get some coaching, what would be the best channels to reach you?
Yeah, I'm pretty basic. Hit me up on LinkedIn. It's Sid Khaitan. Um, yeah, and thanks so much, Jorge. I love jamming with you on this. Always a pleasure to talk about product marketing, and hope y'all see you soon.
Awesome. Have a great day.